Hello again, another live of the year, and you read the title. We're going to talk about one of the best censored 11 cartoons called Cool Black and the Sebben Dwarfs, an obvious parody of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. In this case, however, with black racial stereotypes. I don't call it racist, however, because cartoons back then had racial stereotypes that were considered to be wrong back then, and they're certainly wrong today. But there were actually, for Warner Brothers, however, there were actually set 11 of these a group of 11 cartoons in which we will call them censored 11. These cartoons feature racial stereotypes, mainly with black people. But the best of these but what is one of the best of these cartoons, however? Well, it's from 1943, as I mentioned before, Coal Black and the Seven Dwarfs. And I mentioned, is the obvious spoof of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And this cartoon, and it's a really cool World War II propaganda cartoon because the Seven Dwarfs, the Seven Dwarfs, yeah, this cartoon does use blackface people, not for racial stereotyping, but because to put I don't know, a type of a surprise to the story. You know, it's exactly the same story as Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, or the Witch Kid. You know, but the key difference here is that it's played by black characters, and what I mean by that is that they have blackface, as I mentioned before. It has blackface, but I don't feel that it's racism but I don't feel like that is racist for me, because I'm surprised that this played in theaters. I am actually surprised that this played in theaters because Coal Black and the Seven Dwarfs is one of the best censored 11 cartoons of them all. But not because of racial stereotyping, but because it has a lot of great pacing. It has a clever spoof to the original with the same story, but with jazz music. Since I love jazz, I grew up listening to jazz, so this is my pick since it was a censored 11 cartoon, since it is a censored 11 cartoon. But anyway, it definitely has some great gags, and one of my favorites being the ending gag, in which one of the dwarfs kiss Coal Black, making her wake up from the sleep of death, as I like to call it. From the sleep of death, as I like to call it. Well, anyway, from the sleep of death, as I like to call it. I like this cartoon not because of racial stereotyping, but because it's a clever spoof of the original Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It was directed by Robert Clampett back in 1943, and it's considered to be one of the best censored 11 cartoons of them all, as I mentioned before. And you know, it's not because I know this actually has racial stereotypes, but it's not bad for me, because I don't like before you go into the comments to disagree with me. I don't like racism. I hate racism, but in this instance, the cartoon is great. It has a lot of great pacing, great rhythm, great music. Yeah, that's it. And that's what I wanted to say. If this cartoon wasn't for the racial stereotyping, Best cartoons of them all.